3 days after burying my husband, I came home to find my entire life stuffed into garbage bags on the curb. My mother-in-law stood in the doorway with a cold smile and said, "This house belongs to Rayal family now." If you're just tuning in, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and turn on post notifications so you never miss our next story. We'd also love to hear from you, so drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. The rain hammered against the mahogany casket like bullets on metal, each drop echoing the shattered pieces of a woman's heart. Black umbrellas formed a sea of mourning as the preacher's voice cut through the storm, speaking words that felt foreign and empty. Elena stood there, her trembling hands clutching a single white rose, watching as they lowered the only man who had ever truly loved her into the cold earth. Marcus had been everything: husband, protector, dream builder. At 34, he was supposed to have decades left, supposed to grow old with her, supposed to see their future children take their first steps. Instead, a drunk driver had stolen all of that in one horrific moment on Highway 85. The police said he died instantly, that he didn't suffer. But she was suffering enough for both of them. The funeral director's gentle touch on her shoulder signaled it was time to leave. Family members and friends began dispersing, their whispered condolences blending with the rain. But she remained frozen, staring at the fresh mound of dirt that now held her entire world. Her mother-in-law, Vivian, approached with calculated steps, her designer heels clicking against the wet pavement. "Come on, honey," Vivian said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "It's time to go home and start healing." But something in Vivian's eyes, a cold glint that had been there since the day she married Marcus, made her stomach twist. She nodded silently, unaware that the woman beside her had already set devastating plans in motion. Plans that would shatter what little remained of her world. The house felt like a tomb. Every corner held memories of Marcus. His coffee mug still in the sink, his cologne lingering in their bedroom, his reading glasses folded neatly on the nightstand. She moved through the space like a ghost, her bare feet silent against the hardwood floors he had installed with his own hands 3 summers ago. Exhaustion finally claimed her and she collapsed onto their bed, still wearing her funeral dress. Sleep came in fragments, haunted by dreams of Marcus calling her name, reaching for her across an impossible distance. When dawn crept through the curtains, she awakened to the sound of voices downstairs, urgent, hushed conversations that made her pulse quicken. Wrapping Marcus's robe around her shoulders, she crept to the staircase. Through the banister rails, she could see Vivian directing 2 men she didn't recognize as they moved furniture and boxes. Her heart lurched as she watched them handle Marcus's belongings with careless efficiency. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice hoarse from crying. "What's happening here?" The men froze, but Vivian turned with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Oh, sweetheart, you're awake. These gentlemen are just helping me organize things. Don't worry about it." But worry was exactly what gripped her as she noticed the systematic way they were packing everything that had been theirs: wedding photos, books, even the throw pillows she had carefully chosen for the couch. Something was terribly wrong, and the way Vivian's smile widened told her that her nightmare was just beginning. "This is my house now, Elena." The words hit her like a physical blow, spoken with the casual cruelty of someone swatting a fly. Vivian stood in the center of the living room, surrounded by boxes labeled with Elena's name in thick black marker. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but Marcus never changed the deed after your father-in-law passed." Elena's legs gave out and she gripped the stair railing for support. "That's impossible. We lived here for 5 years. This is our home." "Was your home," Vivian corrected, her manicured fingers adjusting her pearl necklace. "Legally, it belongs to the Johnson family estate. Always has. Marcus was just borrowing it." The men continued their work, unmoved by the devastation unfolding before them. Elena watched in horror as they carried out the rocking chair where she used to read to Marcus on Sunday mornings, the dining table where they had shared countless meals and dreams of the future. "Where am I supposed to go?" Elena whispered, her voice breaking. Vivian shrugged with practiced indifference. "That's not my concern anymore. But I've packed your things." She gestured towards several black trash bags lined up by the front door like body bags. "These contain what belongs to you personally. Everything else stays with the real family." The phrase cut deeper than any blade. Elena had spent years trying to earn Vivian's acceptance, believing that love and dedication would eventually win her over. Now she understood that to Vivian she had never been family at all, just an inconvenient obstacle that death had finally removed. Elena's hands shook as she dialed her sister's number, the phone slipping twice before she managed to hold it steady. Through her tears, she could barely make out Vivian's satisfied smirk as the older woman supervised the final removal of Elena's belongings. "Lena, I need help," she whispered into the phone, her voice raw from sobbing. 20 minutes later, Lena's battered Honda Civic screeched into the driveway. Elena had never been so grateful to see her younger sister's fierce expression as Lena marched up to the front door, her braids swinging with each determined step. "What the hell is this?" Lena demanded, confronting Vivian directly. "You're throwing my sister out of her own house?" "It was never her house," Vivian replied coolly. "Check the public records if you don't believe me. This property has been in the Johnson family for 40 years. Lena's eyes blazed with fury, but Elena touched her arm, knowing they were powerless against legal documents. They loaded the trash bags into Lena's car in silence, each bag feeling heavier than the last. As they drove away, Elena turned back to see Vivian standing in the doorway of what had been her home, watching their departure with visible satisfaction. "We'll figure this out," Lena promised, her knuckles white as she gripped the steering wheel. "There has to be something we can do." But deep in her heart, Elena feared that Marcus's death had cost her everything, not just her husband but her entire life as she knew it. 3 days after being thrown out, Elena sat in the cramped office of attorney Gabe Miller, clutching a folder of documents Lena had helped her gather. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across his concerned face as he reviewed the property records. "Mrs. Johnson," he said finally, removing his glasses to clean them, a gesture Elena was learning meant bad news. "I'm afraid your mother-in-law is technically correct. The house was never transferred to you and Marcus." Elena's heart sank further than she thought possible. "But we paid the mortgage. We renovated the kitchen, the bathrooms. We treated it like our home because Marcus said it was. That's what makes this particularly tragic," Gabe continued, pulling out another document. "According to these bank records, Marcus had been making payments on the mortgage for years, but the deed remained in his father's name. When his father died 2 years ago, it automatically passed to Vivian as the surviving spouse." The room spun around Elena as the full scope of her situation became clear. She had lost her husband, her home, and apparently had no legal recourse. But then Gabe's expression shifted, his eyes narrowing as he studied something more carefully. "Wait," he murmured, leaning forward. "There's something unusual here. These mortgage payments, they're coming from an account I don't recognize. Not Marcus's primary account, and definitely not from any account linked to Vivian." He looked up at Elena with renewed interest. "Mrs. Johnson, did your husband have any other bank accounts? Perhaps something he kept separate for business purposes?" Elena shook her head, but then remembered Marcus's old desk in their bedroom, the one Vivian's men had been so careful to load into their truck. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned on Lena's lumpy couch, her mind racing with questions about Marcus's mysterious bank account. At 3 a.m. she finally gave up and made coffee, staring out the kitchen window at the empty street. "Can't sleep either?" Lena appeared in her pajamas, her hair wrapped in a silk scarf. "Something doesn't add up," Elena said, turning to face her sister. "Marcus was many things, but secretive wasn't one of them. If he had another bank account, why wouldn't he tell me?" Lena sat down beside her, wrapping them both in a throw blanket. "Maybe he was planning a surprise? You know how he loved those elaborate birthday plans." But even as Lena spoke, they both knew this felt different. Bigger. Marcus had been acting strangely in the weeks before his death, taking phone calls in private, staying late at the construction site, checking his phone constantly. At the time, Elena had attributed it to work stress, but now those memories took on a more ominous tone. "There's something else," Elena said quietly. "The night before he died, Marcus told me he had something important to tell me. He said after his current project finished, we needed to have a serious talk about our future." Lena's eyes widened. "Did he say what about?" "No. The accident happened the next morning." Elena's voice broke as she remembered their last conversation, how Marcus had seemed both excited and nervous. But what if it wasn't about work? What if he discovered something about Vivian, about the house? The sisters sat in silence, both understanding that Marcus's death might not have been the random tragedy they thought it was. The next morning, Elena drove to Johnson Construction, the company Marcus had built from nothing into a thriving business. The familiar sight of orange hard hats and concrete mixers usually comforted her, but today everything felt foreign and threatening. "Mrs. J," called out Tommy Walker, Marcus's foreman and closest friend. His weathered face creased with sympathy as he approached. "How you holding up?" "I'm managing," Elena lied. "Tommy, I need to ask you something. Was Marcus working on anything unusual before he died? Any special projects?" Tommy's expression shifted, and he glanced around nervously before leading her into the trailer that served as the site office. Inside, he locked the door and pulled down the blinds. "Marcus swore me to secrecy," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But with him gone, maybe you should know." He opened a filing cabinet and pulled out a manila folder marked "Private MJ Only." Inside were photographs of official documents, bank statements, and what looked like property surveys. "Your husband was investigating something," Tommy explained. "About 3 months ago he started asking questions about the house you lived in. Said something felt wrong about the inheritance from his father." Elena's hands trembled as she flipped through the documents. There were copies of wire transfers, legal correspondence, and a handwritten note in Marcus's distinctive script. "V forged Dad's signature. House should be mine. Get proof." Tommy continued. "Marcus hired a private investigator. Said he suspected his stepmother had manipulated his father's will somehow. He was getting close to proving it when..." He couldn't finish the sentence. The folder slipped from Elena's hands, papers scattering across the floor like fallen leaves. Marcus hadn't just been her husband. He had been fighting for their future, and someone had silenced him before he could reveal the truth. The address Tommy provided led Elena to a strip mall office wedged between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. The sign on the door read "Lawrence Investigations" in fading gold letters. Inside, she found Rosa Lawrence, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who looked like she'd seen every kind of human betrayal imaginable. "You must be Elena," Rosa said without preamble. "I've been expecting you. Marcus hired you to investigate his stepmother?" Rosa nodded grimly, pulling out a thick file from her desk drawer. "Your husband was convinced Vivian had manipulated his father's estate. The old man had dementia in his final years, and she had complete control over his affairs." She spread several documents across her desk: medical records, witness statements, financial transactions. "Harold Johnson originally planned to leave the house to Marcus. I have copies of an earlier will that proves it. But 3 months before Harold died, Vivian convinced him to change everything." Elena studied the papers, her anger building with each revelation. "So the house should be mine?" "Should be, yes. But proving fraud against someone with dementia is nearly impossible, especially when the primary witness is dead." Rosa's expression softened. Marcus was getting frustrated. He'd invested almost $50,000 trying to build a case. $50,000? Elena gasped. "From where?" Rosa pointed to a bank statement. "He opened a separate account, took out loans against his business. He was desperate to give you the security you deserved." She paused, studying Elena's face carefully. "But there's something else. Something Marcus discovered just days before his death that changed everything." The investigator pulled out a final document, a death certificate that made Elena's blood run cold. According to the coroner's report, Harold Johnson had died from acute digitalis poisoning, not the heart failure everyone believed. Digitalis. Elena stared at the death certificate, her mind struggling to process the implications. "You mean, it's derived from foxglove plants," Rosa explained, her voice clinical and detached. "In controlled doses, it's used to treat heart conditions. In larger amounts, it causes cardiac arrest that looks completely natural, especially in an elderly man with a history of heart problems." The room felt like it was spinning. Elena gripped the edge of Rosa's desk, fighting waves of nausea. "Are you saying Vivian murdered her husband?" "I'm saying the evidence suggests it. Vivian was a nurse before she married Harold. She had access to medical knowledge and digitalis through her contacts at the hospital. The timing of Harold's will change, combined with this cause of death, creates a compelling pattern." Rosa pulled out photographs of Vivian's garden, taken with a telephoto lens. Among the carefully manicured flower beds were several patches of foxglove plants, their purple bell-shaped blooms innocent-looking but deadly. Marcus was planning to take this evidence to the police, Rosa continued. He scheduled a meeting with Detective Owen for the morning after his accident. The word accident hung in the air between them, heavy with new implications. Elena's husband hadn't just discovered fraud, he had uncovered murder. And if Vivian was capable of killing her husband for money, what would stop her from eliminating Marcus before he could expose her? The brake failure in Marcus's truck, Elena whispered. It wasn't random, was it? Rosa's silence was answer enough. They weren't just fighting for a house anymore. They were seeking justice for 2 murders, and the killer was still walking free. Detective Sarah Owen had seen her share of domestic murders disguised as accidents, but the case Rosa Lawrence presented challenged everything she thought she knew about the Johnson family. Sitting across from Elena in the police station's sterile interview room, she reviewed the evidence with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent 15 years distinguishing truth from lies. This is substantial, Owen admitted, tapping her pen against Marcus's file. But it's also largely circumstantial. Digitalis poisoning is hard to prove after cremation, and car accidents happen every day. Elena leaned forward desperately. But the pattern, the will change, the timing, the foxglove plants. Suspicious, yes. Prosecutable? That's another matter entirely. Owen closed the file and studied Elena carefully. What I can do is open an investigation. But I need you to understand something. If Vivian Johnson is guilty of what we suspect, approaching her directly could be extremely dangerous. The detective's words sent chills down Elena's spine, but they also ignited something fierce inside her. Marcus had died trying to protect their future, and she wouldn't let his sacrifice be meaningless. What do you need from me? Elena asked. Owen smiled grimly. We need evidence of the forgery Rosa mentioned, and we need it without alerting Vivian to our investigation. The problem is, those documents are likely in the house you no longer have access to. But I know every inch of that place, Elena said, her mind racing. Marcus kept important papers in a safe behind our wedding photo in the bedroom. If the forgery exists, it would be there. Getting into that house without a warrant would be breaking and entering, Owen warned. Elena met her gaze steadily. Not if I'm invited. Elena's hands shook as she dialed Vivian's number, knowing that one wrong word could cost her everything, or worse, her life. Rosa and Detective Owen sat beside her, recording equipment ready to capture whatever happened next. Vivian? It's Elena. She forced warmth into her voice. I wanted to apologize for how things ended. I know you're grieving too. There was a long pause before Vivian responded, her tone cautious. What do you want, Elena? I left something in the house, Marcus's ring. It was his father's, and I know how much it would mean to you to have it back in the family. The lie came surprisingly easily. Could I possibly come by and get it? I promise I won't take anything else. Another pause. Elena could almost hear Vivian calculating, weighing the risks against her desire to maintain her innocent facade. I suppose that would be fine, Vivian said finally. But I'll need to be there when you come. I can't have you wandering around unsupervised. Of course. Would this afternoon work? 2 o'clock. And Elena? Just you. I don't want your sister causing a scene. After ending the call, Detective Owen looked concerned. Are you sure about this? If she suspects anything. She won't, Elena said with more confidence than she felt. Vivian's greatest weakness is her ego. She wants me to see how completely she's won. But as they finalized their plan, Rosa would monitor from a van outside while Owen waited for Elena's signal. Doubt crept into Elena's mind. She was about to walk into the home of a woman who had likely committed 2 murders. If Vivian realized what Elena knew, there might not be a third victim to worry about. The house felt like a museum of her former life. Vivian had redecorated with cold efficiency, replacing Elena and Marcus's warm touches with sterile perfection. Family photos were gone, replaced by generic artwork. The soul of the home had been surgically removed. The ring should be in the bedroom safe, Elena said, grateful that her voice remained steady. Marcus always kept his father's jewelry there. Vivian followed her upstairs, her heels clicking against the hardwood like a countdown timer. In the master bedroom, now Vivian's domain, Elena moved toward the wall where their wedding photo had hung. In its place was a landscape painting that meant nothing to anyone. "The safe is behind there," Elena said, pointing to the painting. "I know where it is," Vivian replied sharply. "But I don't know the combination." Elena's heart raced. This was the moment everything depended on. "Marcus used our anniversary date. 8/15/07. Vivian moved the painting aside and input the numbers. The safe clicked open, revealing stacks of documents, jewelry, and, most importantly, a manila envelope marked for Elin only in Marcus's handwriting. "I don't see any ring," Vivian said, rifling through the contents. "Maybe it's in that envelope," Elena suggested innocently. The moment Vivian pulled out the envelope's contents, her face went white. Inside were copies of the original will, proof of the forgery, and a letter from Marcus detailing his suspicions about his father's death. "You manipulative little bitch," Vivian whispered, her mask finally slipping completely. "You didn't come for a ring." Elena backed toward the door, but Vivian was already reaching into the safe, pulling out something that made Elena's blood freeze. A small pistol, its barrel gleaming in the afternoon light. "You have no idea what you've stumbled into," Vivian said, the gun steady in her hands. "Harold was a weak fool and Marcus was just like him. Neither of them deserved what I built." Elena's phone buzzed, the signal for Detective Owen, but reaching for it would mean death. Instead, she kept Vivian talking, knowing Rosa was recording everything from the van outside. "You killed them both," Elena said, backing slowly toward the bedroom window. "Harold was dying anyway. I just hastened the inevitable. And Marcus." Vivian's laugh was cold as winter. Cutting his brake lines was almost too easy. Men never check their vehicles properly. "Why?" Elena whispered. "He was your stepson. He was an obstacle to my future. This house, the construction business, everything Harold built, it was mine by right. I nursed that old man through his final years while his ungrateful son played house with some ghetto princess." The racial slur hit like a physical blow, but Elena forced herself to remain calm. Through the window she could see movement. Detective Owen and her backup were surrounding the house. "You won't get away with this," Elena said. "Won't I? 2 more tragic accidents. The grieving widow, driven mad by loss, kills her husband's stepmother before taking her own life." Vivian's finger tightened on the trigger. "It's almost poetic." The bedroom door exploded inward as police officers swarmed the room. Vivian spun toward them, but Detective Owen was faster, her own weapon drawn and aimed. "Drop it, Vivian. It's over." For a moment, time froze. Then Vivian's shoulders sagged and the gun clattered to the floor. As they cuffed her, she looked at Elena with pure hatred. "You think you've won? You're still nothing. You'll always be nothing." But as Elena watched them lead Vivian away, she felt something she hadn't experienced since Marcus's death: hope. The truth was finally free, and with it, the possibility of reclaiming not just her home but her future. 6 months later, Elena stood in the garden behind her house now legally and completely. She had planted new flowers where Vivian's foxgloves once grew, choosing sunflowers for their warmth and resilience. Marcus's construction company was thriving under her management, and she had used the insurance money from his death to establish a foundation helping other widows fight legal battles. Vivian was serving life without parole for 2 counts of murder. The trial had been swift once Rosa's recording was played in court, Vivian's confession sealing her fate. As the sun set behind the trees Marcus had planted when they first moved in, Elena felt his presence in the warm breeze, in the sound of wind chimes on the porch, in the strength she had discovered within herself. She had survived the worst betrayal imaginable and emerged not just intact but transformed. The real family, she now understood, wasn't determined by blood or legal documents. It was built on love, loyalty, and the courage to fight for what was right. And in that definition she had always belonged. Thanks for watching. Give us a like if you liked the video and share with us in the comments what you think about this lovely tale. We always enjoy reading your comments.